1,000 years ago, people didn't have jobs, they had positions. They didn't have the beauty and the enjoyment of being able to select what they wanted to do as a intellectual challenge, for a paycheck, for employment. They rather endured. And over the course of 800 years, there became this evolution of the role player, the artisan, the craftsmaker, into something more liberating, something that became known more as the entrepreneur, which has taken on any number of meanings, but one where I hope to convey the importance of here in our community and communities around the world. Society's put together a wide gambit of what is entrepreneurial. The young boy in the garage with his dog. There's the founders of Facebook, or were they the founders of Facebook? To the madman in his house who's crafting some new blender that blends food 7 times the speed of a normal blender. Or people who won't date entrepreneurs because there's a set of personal characteristics that entrepreneurs have already. They're neurotic, they're on Red Bull all the time, and all they do is think about their startup and their IPO and all that stuff. And the more traditional, perhaps, is the entrepreneur who kind of your father warned you from dating. When you heard that he's just an entrepreneur, you never know what that really meant. But I think what we see is that over time, the notion of entrepreneurship really does matter. It's important not just as a function of society, but even on the micro level, it's impactful for people. It's impactful for communities. Entrepreneurs have a value that they bring to the community that is about creating ideas, sharing ideas, bringing new advancements to the community, right or wrong, but even more individually at home. There's a higher happiness quotient. There's intellect that entrepreneurs bring to the community that you might not get from a large $50 billion corporation. So even the words of Herbert Hoover, in order to fix the economy, it wasn't so much about legislation as much it was about buyers and sellers. Am I selling you something that you want to buy? Do people want something different? And that's what entrepreneurs over time addressed. What's interesting about entrepreneurship is that it is human. There is no other species that barter and trade and communicate and interact in the marketplace. No other species really has a marketplace. So just by the fact that from a characteristic of who we are as a species, entrepreneurship is very vital for us to continue, grow, leverage, and evolve. So how does it happen? Does it happen with the young kid in the garage with the Red Bull? In many instances, it happens as a talent. It happens with luck. It happens with timing. And part of the things that I tried to grasp was, could entrepreneurship be systematic? Could it be something that could be stamped out as a template? And things that you hear often about places like Palo Alto in the Silicon Valley, could that happen in Palos Heights? Palos Heights is a suburb of Chicago. Or Palo, Iowa, which is, I think, has 79 people in it. So Silicon Valley versus Silicon Prairie versus Silicon Highway, all of these over time had different systematic occurrences that some endured longer than others of entrepreneurs and facilitating entrepreneurship. The other point I would put in the back of your head is, could entrepreneurship be something as insane as hereditary? Could it be something that it was just genetic? Those that were able to manage ideas quicker, faster, figure out how to process them, and scavenge for resources in order to make them come to fruition. Community-wise, I think we always celebrate where we live in our community. And here are a couple of entrepreneurs. Frederick Tudor, who took water from Walden Pond and actually was able to import it as ice to as far away as the Caribbean, solving problems like supply chain, transportation, etc. An entrepreneur in the 1700s that endured through 1860 and on. Thoreau's dad, not the famous one, but actually his father, and the pencil company that he helped started was part of the democratization of power of the pen. And lastly, Walden Pond itself had an amusement park. Many people don't know that in 1902 it burned down, but it was an amusement park brought because folks who petitioned the Fitchburg Railway to be able to sell goods, wares, and services at the beautiful place of Walden Pond. With respect to who entrepreneurs come, how they come into pass, it's not a rich person, boy in a garage. It really is something that everyone can experience. Everyone has the potential to become an entrepreneur. When you look at kind of where entrepreneurs are born, what's interesting in the three that are highlighted is that Germany, which arguably is one of the most powerful nations in the world, certainly the most powerful in Europe, has the same percentage of entrepreneurs as Iran. And that's because people who share ideas, who are able to empower the genesis of the ideal into reality, is what drives entrepreneurial success. It's not the fact that they were born in one particular country. China, at less than 1%, has all of the resources and wealth and manpower, and yet somehow aren't able to compete with creating new businesses. And job experience, you'll see it's all over the board. You don't need to have 30 years of experience at IBM or Apple Computer. You can be of 0 to 5% and be just as compelled to become an entrepreneur as someone who has had a career at a single company. And then when you look at even more human characteristics, 40% were firstborn. Some are lower middle class. Over half are first in their whole family to start a business. So they weren't serial. It wasn't, again, about having a next generation. It was, I'm going to do this. I'm going to empower myself to become an entrepreneur. And last is, many of them had one child. It's not a 22-year-old person's game. They've actually had one child. So there's been no correlation between entrepreneurs coming from wealthy, successful, multi-generational businesses, and in the same sense, there is none that entrepreneurs have to be cooped up in an incubator in downtown Boston or in Palo Alto, all sharing a 100-square-foot space. The reality is, entrepreneurs have been able to successfully conceive ideas and be able to motivate themselves and people around them and catalyze the creation of this idea into a real business. That's what entrepreneurship is. That's the value that it creates for not just people and their families who are involved, but the community as a whole. I am an entrepreneur. I sold Christmas wreaths when I was 5 and 6 years old. I went on in college to sell cassette tapes for my band out of a Volkswagen Beetle. And when I got married, I started selling radio components, antennas, towers, batteries for a big company. And a few years ago, sitting at dinner with my kids, I'm selling products for my own company over a Twitter application on the iPhone. And what this really kind of signifies is as entrepreneurs themselves evolve. They evolve not just in the subject matter that they're dealing with in business, but in the modes of communication, the needs that they have, the experience and competencies that they've derived over their own maturity. And I learned how to launch great ideas into great businesses. One is the yellow line of every football game that's on TV. That's really for people who don't know football, know where a play should start and where it needs to end. But believe it or not, it's a business that was a great idea and has thrived. I've also been a part of bad ideas. Good ideas that became bad businesses. Things like a 70-foot digital fish tank. And it's a long story why we thought it was a good idea, but it was a bad business at the end of the day. And it came to me that the reason why that there's good and bad businesses and the impacts that it has is your whole goal should be about creating a business and utilizing an idea that one, has the integrity that you wish to create and portray in your business, but two, is that somewhere along the line it has a community impact. An impact first perhaps on your own community. The best place to vet an idea is certainly perhaps in your backyard. And so as entrepreneurs, there's kind of this balance of 6 things that I've learned, that I saw, that I watched. And these are what I found to have entrepreneurs yelling for glory and hooray and success and excitement. The first is the idea. Ideas are what the world shares when they don't share normal things together: peace, language, food, water. Every nation, every person shares an idea. And so the idea itself is so critical to becoming an entrepreneur. Is your idea possible? You know, there are some companies that try to do things like beat Mother Nature. Not a good idea. You're not going to beat Mother Nature. But other ideas, do they power things? Do they empower you? Do they save? Do they host? Do they create? Do they dispel? Do they destroy? The idea is really vital for entrepreneurs and for the world to recognize in order to grow the business. Can your idea scale? And lastly, is your idea disruptive? The idea I had was something for my mother. That's my mother and her granddaughter. And I wanted to create a business around being able to keep my parents, my children's grandparents, in touch with others and loved ones. The second is manpower. And the key to manpower is that it is going to be your biggest asset. It's not the technology you use. It's not the marketing. It's not how many friends you have on Facebook or LinkedIn. It's really the people. And it will cost you maybe friendships. It may cost you colleagues. There'll be tough decisions that have to be made. But at the end of the day, you really need the core group of people who love and celebrate the journey that you're on as entrepreneurs. Next is community resources. The whole notion of outsourcing is dangerous, not because you can't find stuff cheaper, better, faster, quicker, 1,000 miles away, 8,000 miles away, but because you need to know that there's probably a really good chance that locally you can do stuff. You can build stuff. Do you know that above Neshoba Bakery, you can get stuff manufactured? You can get yogurt tested by user interface testers. There's a world of people here that can create reality for your idea just within 10 miles. And so before you outsource intellect and outsource capabilities to other places, look to your backyard. Look first at the people around you. Fourth, is capital. You know, people think this is the hardest thing. Oh, I need to get funded. But the reality is there's a ton of capital. There's a ton of capital local. People are looking for ideas as much as you're looking for capital. And so you need to get out there. You need to celebrate the notion that you have a brilliant idea or an idea that you want feedback on with folks who share the same passion to grow your community. Look for investors that share that passion more than they almost understand your idea. Because there's a great chance that your idea will change. There's always a mutation that goes on. But certainly the passion should always remain, and that's what makes entrepreneurs successful. So I'll show you. Concord. Every red dot is where I've got money from. So don't go showing up at their front doors after this speech. But the reality is these are folks who've invested. They've invested $10,000, $50,000, $5,000, $500,000. But these are people who invested in local companies, services businesses, toy companies, bookstores, publishers, you name it. These are people. These aren't big institutions. This is actual people who want to take the money that they made over the course of their venture as entrepreneurs and pay it forward to a new crowd of entrepreneurs. Next to last, is conscience. Be authentic. No one wants to sell a good that they don't really believe in. And it's not because it's a drain for them, but actually customers and people will see it. They're going to smell it out. People know fake. And so I'm not saying that Khloe Kardashian or whatever Kardashian that is on the lower left isn't someone that you shouldn't go and approach for marketing. But at the end of the day, the right picture is a picture of my son who comes to board meetings with me. And that's the authenticity that we like to have, is that we're building products for families. And so we want our family around. That's an authenticity that we hope that we share and convey to folks that we sell product to. And then last is courage. This is probably the most gut-wrenching piece of being an entrepreneur. Entrepreneurs, during the course of the day, are filled with terror and euphoria, like every 10 minutes. And the reality is it's very tough. It's tough if you don't get paid. It's tough if you don't get a paycheck. It's tough if you're new. It's tough if you're learning subject matter, if your team hasn't come together yet. But you have to be committed. You have to be tough. You have to have conviction in the idea that you're trying to build and turn into a business. These two gentlemen are folks that I knew who started a company called AirPrint. They actually ended up giving up. They were intimidated by the notion that Apple was coming out with a product called AirPrint. And so they came up with it earlier. And yes, they probably were right. They had trademarks, copyrights. But they lost kind of their confidence, and they lost their steam, and they lost kind of their conviction in their idea. And now they've lost what arguably was a fantastic business opportunity, which is to create a printer for mobile, which over time they surrendered. And in fact, the legal term in intellectual property is they did surrender. They surrendered their IP. And so at the end of the day, you have to have the conviction and the toughness. This was a prayer for my mother. My mother 2 years ago was diagnosed with stage 4 colon cancer. And so for me it was, am I going to be distracted by my business, or am I going to be distracted by my mother? And the answer is I can't be distracted by either. I have to continue to fight on, continue to be supportive, continue to be focused on the business and the idea that I have. And so it was a wake-up call, but in the same sense it brought peace and more conviction to me in wanting to build a business and wanting to go and take an idea through its genesis to survive and become hopefully a great new addition to our community. So entrepreneurs, in my opinion, mark the future of our community. They're ones where they're the underpinnings for future business growth. When you leave here, every kind of vacant storefront, every vacant new business sign, window, think about, is there an opportunity for you to create your business right there? You don't need to go and do it virtually. You don't need to go to China to get it made. You actually can find people here who support the dream and the vision of being part of something, business that will be amazing. And these are people that just in the last 12 months, people that live across the street from me, down the street from you, up the street from him, her, who've all started a new business or all building their businesses. And they're turning those ideas into hopefully amazing and wonderful additions to the community. So, you always have to end with a Chinese Confucius-like quote. But if you want 1 year of prosperity, grow grain. If you want 10 years of prosperity, grow trees. If you want 100 years of prosperity, grow people. Thank you.